Hi there. This is my review for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, Episode 4, titled 7, because there's 7 champions. My reviews focus on the 7 most notable points about an episode, because 7 is a good number. But diving into this, it's weird reviewing it because, on the one hand, I'm happy that this episode is getting rave reviews from general audiences, TV-first audiences. You're seeing critics, IMDb, just looking at the live reactor channels on YouTube. Universal praise. All of them consistently saying this is the best the franchise has been since the first half of Game of Thrones over a decade ago. And that's really no surprise when you consider that this is the first season since 2014 that was based on finished prose text written by Martin himself. That since Game of Thrones Season 4 in 2014. And no, they didn't run out of source material. I don't know how people convince themselves that. The controversy at the time, what in Season 5 was, you threw out all of Sansa's story in the 4th and 5th books to randomly have her assaulted by... She never even meets Ramsay Bolton in the books. Or this racist stuff they're doing with TV Dorne. They're beloved... Well, some people really identifying with the Dornish characters, and you turn this into a nightmare of... That was really offensive to, like, Latino people I know. But all of that, and just the lack of plot logic, even in the Jon Snow and Stannis storyline of they leave Hardhome by ship and suddenly they're in the middle of the continent at the gates of Castle Black. What? All of that. They didn't run out of books. And saying that is to erase the controversy at the time that happened, that you ignored all of the book readers saying, what are you doing? That you're acting like this is Martin's fault when it is blatantly, these guys were changing things even before Season 5. They just ramped it up in Season 5. And I have a whole separate video, please check it out, which I think came out pretty well, on how it's really not a fair comparison to compare House of the Dragon to this. Even House of the Dragon Season 1, which everyone loved, it's based on an outline. The in-universe history book Fire and Blood. It's not a prose text. So there are a few, lines of dialogue in it here and there that they quoted when they could, but we knew going in this is going to feel like the last time we were adapting finished prose text from Martin. Like, the last time Martin himself wrote a script for Game of Thrones was in Season 4, with the Lion and the Rose of the Joffrey wedding. So, yeah, I can understand why people go, wow, this is even better than House of the Dragon Season 1. Like I said, that's fish in a barrel, but wow, this feels like early Game of Thrones again. That, on the one hand, we're happy everyone is universally praising this, but among the book readers, we have an asterisk at the end of that, because they made some slight changes to the big final scene. Dunk's big speech and then Baelor riding out. Because this is one of the iconic scenes in all of Martin's writings about Westeros. Not just the Dunk and Egg stories, I mean everything he's ever written about it, including all 5 main novels. This moment is up there with Ned Stark's execution, or the Red Wedding or something. It is that level. Which means it gets held up to a much higher standard. That it's held up to a higher standard of scrutiny. I didn't dislike it, I didn't dislike the episode, part of my process is working through, okay, I can see why it's a little different. Well, okay, let me get started on the actual list. That leads us into the main point of this whole video. Point 1 of 7. Slight changes to Dunk's big final scene. Removing a knight who remembered his vows. Well, it's a couple of changes that overlap that they did, so let me explain this. That they're all linked. The TV episode has the nobles respond to Dunk by comically taunting him during his big dramatic speech. That Otho Bracken, and the subtitles do identify it's Otho Bracken, the Brood of Bracken. Bracken stands up and farts loudly to mock Dunk's plea to rise up and join and fight with me, fight for honor, you know what's right. And he just farts at him. toying with him that maybe I was getting up to join you. In the novella, Dunk rides back and forth calling out specific lords by name. And it's so awkward that he's going, Lord Lannister, please, Lord Caron, please, pointing at them, shouting at them for all to hear, and they're pretending not to hear him. Or they're continuing to talk to each other, even though he's like 30 feet away. They know, everyone knows he's trying to call them out. Actually, Otho Bracken was the only one who had even token dignity, token courtesy for him, that he was the one who at least acknowledged him, and curtly but non-offensively said, look, your cause might be just, but I don't know you, so this isn't my fight. To show the spectrum of reactions like that. Look, we all know that the Brackens are vile traitors who fought for the Black Dragon, and I would expect nothing less of them, but it's still the choice to add it in like this in this context. But thinking on it and discussing it with others, particularly watching Westeros.org's review, I agree with those saying that shifting this to a lord openly mocking him instead of ignoring him, mocking him in this case with a fart, it actually shows how flippant and corrupt the ruling class has become. And that's been repeated throughout history, unfortunately, and you see a lot of it now, that there comes a point when the ruling class gets so corrupt that they even lose the thin veneer of hiding behind polite manners and etiquette, and just how crass they become, openly taunting the very idea, if we're not even trying to pretend we're polite about this, and openly, with toilet humor, mocking people who talk about values and honor. I'm thinking of, I read a lot of Mark Twain because my mom was really into it, but Mark Twain talking about the behavior of all the dirty millionaires of the Gilded Age in 1880s America, that just you realize just how crass they are, because they're not even pretending to be honorable anymore. So, if the goal here, you could argue the goal is, well, we want to show the nobles are so corrupt that they're not even, like Tywin Lannister is a ruthless but clean cut. No, that there's a difference between, like, Tywin and Walder Frey. Walder is the dirt Tywin picks off his boot, even though Tywin is not a good person. That I can see what you're trying to do, but my complaint is they needed to play that up a little more. That play up that this is not a shared reaction by the crowds of commoners who have come to watch and support Dunk. They do intercut a little. They intercut with Red the Prostitute or Egg and Steely Pate. But of course Egg would support him. That you need to show people in general who haven't even met Dunk being disgusted at the lords taunting him like this. For like a shot or two, not even with words. Just a quick cut montage with that you needed to emphasize, like, or a commoner father looking down at his son in reaction to Bracken being that disgusting about this matter of defending the innocent and honor and everything. I am trying to do that in my video right now, obviously not very effectively, but you see what I'm saying, that with a very small change of just more lingering shots on the faces of the small folk, groups of small folk and families, reacting to Bracken being that crass about that. And I'm trying to use like shots from other episodes, like when they reacted to Aerion killing a horse. Now they didn't have dialogue or anything. You could tell the commoners are offended by how corrupt the nobles have become. I'm not going to make this about defending a fart joke, because, okay, he's crass, I get that. I'm not upset at putting in that he taunts him crassly on general principle. I just think it should have been filmed differently. Little differences that would have gone a long way. Because then again, in the days since the episode came out, Ira Parker just did a Reddit AMA. And he didn't really say much. And I gotta say, I hate it when people do Reddit AMAs and they answer in chronological order instead of skimming to look for the best questions. And yes, none of mine got answered, but I'm saying he was responding to people who posted to say thank you. And okay, but even people below me in the thread had asked interesting questions, which he didn't get to either. That don't go in chronological order. This was up for like 3 days. Please skim for the good ones. And if mine weren't good, skip them. Fine. It's just, when he was responding to the thank yous, I went, we need a better way of sorting this. But in that Reddit AMA, which was, he was polite in it, the one thing he did respond to of substance was why he removed Dunk calling out nobles by name and then ignoring him. Like, Lord Lannister, we served you. Lord Tyrell, we served you. It does honor mean nothing to you. That just how much more emphasis it is that he's calling them by name. And Parker explained that he felt it was too repetitive with the second episode. And yes, much of the second episode was already spent establishing these lords do not even remember Sir Arlen, and it means nothing whether they stick up for him or not, but they're still not willing to just go, oh yeah, I vaguely remember him, let Dunk compete. That it wouldn't cost them anything, and they still are so dishonorable and selfish that they wouldn't do that. In the novella, it sort of makes more sense that Dunk might think they would stand up for him now, because before it was just, hey, do you remember me? Can you vouch for me to get into the tourney? This was, everyone saw what Aerion did publicly in front of a crowd of hundreds of people, that he attacked these puppeteers and broke the girl's finger. No one denies he did that versus, oh, well, maybe they don't remember Arlen. This is, he blatantly did something in public. You've sworn knightly vows to defend the innocent. In the book, you can kind of see how Dunk thought something so blatant might actually stir them to do something, if not for his sake, then for the girl who with their own eyes they saw him attacking. But I can see how in a TV format that might feel a bit redundant, that we've already visually shown these aren't people who stick up for the commoners. Maybe not a great reason, but Parker did give a reason of why wasn't I having him call them out by name, and all of that. Okay, would have overlapped too much with episode 2. But this also ties into, it's a web of things, that it ties into what's really the bigger point. They removed the lead up to this moment, that crowds of commoners come to cheer Dunk on. As he's heading to the tourney grounds, there's hundreds of people slowly building up. And at first he thinks they've come to mock him. But then a maiden kisses his cheek, an old man shouts he hopes the gods give him strength, a begging monk stops him to bless his sword, and he just stares around bewildered and asks Steely Pate, why? What am I to them? And he responds, a knight who remembered his vows. And I get teared up even just repeating it. That is one of the most powerful lines in all of the books. And just that all of their hopes are in him, and that just, this is a world where people don't usually do the right thing or pay lip service to honor and all of it. And he is actually doing this, and it's just this beautiful moment of gradually the crowds building up and following him and cheering him on. Over on Westeros.org, Elio and Linda, in their review, made the speculation I line for line agree with because it makes sense, that they think maybe Parker thought it would be weird that in this moment where Dunk is supposed to seem alone and out of options and all hope is lost, in the shift to a visual medium, it would be weird to have him so hopeless that none of the lords in the stands are supporting him. He is alone. While at the same time behind him there are crowds of literally hundreds of commoners cheering him on and on his side. That in the blinders that are put on by book text, you can push that to the side. You couldn't avoid how weird that would look visually. Because in the book, you get the point that the commoners aren't knights. They can't volunteer. None of them can volunteer to be the seventh guy. And even if they did, they'd be killed. Again, you're not supposed to knight more people like that. Like, Raymond had training, so he could at least try to be the sixth guy. But it made sense in the novella why the commoners were cheering him on, but were powerless to help him. I can see how, visual format, it was too weird that in this moment of despair, when he's supposed to be alone, how do you emphasize that the commoners are on his side while still maintaining that balance? And I think that extends to everything of, well, why did we have Bracken insult him and everything? Because they couldn't really show crowds of people cheering him. So I get that. And in the past week, I've mentally processed it of, okay, I can see why it's slightly different because of that. That is an issue that comes up from the transition from page to screen. But literally my one point is when Bracken is taunting Dunk, you needed to intercut a little more to show that the commoners as a group are not laughing. Not just Red or Egg, that people who don't know Dunk, who never met him at the tourney, are just looking at their children disgusted at what the lords are doing. For all of 2 seconds, that would have added a lot more, so it's a filming choice. But I see why they were bouncing with he has to seem alone. So I'm okay with it, and I still, even with these changes, it is still such a powerful moment of TV because the speech is Martin's words. Peter Claffey is Dunk. He embodies the role so much. And just the chills of hearing him, this is Dunk giving Martin's speech about are there no true knights among you. So that overpowered any little asterisk, this is a little different, notes that I had. This was still amazing television. Don't get me wrong. The rest of these go pretty quickly. 0.2 out of 7. And this shows you how trivial, I'm trying to be self-deprecating here, the way Baelor's final scene was shot. Just got to bring this up, that Baelor riding up out of the mist and saying, I'll take Ser Duncan's side, has been imagery seared into my brain for years. As with any other book fan, that through no fault of their own, Parker and his team didn't match it shot for shot with how the graphic novel adaptation did it. That when I mentally picture this, I am picturing the camera angles that the panels in the comic adaptation are doing. And just intellectually, whenever you see like a comic book adaptation movie, like a Batman or a Spider-Man, which is covering a specific story, intellectually, I have to acknowledge that getting so specific as the physical choreography of the scene and camera angles isn't quite how I pictured it in my head. I have to intellectually acknowledge that is not a fair criticism. So I won't take points off for that. I'm just going to mention it, that I pictured it as Baelor just riding out of the mist, and they hear from off camera, I'll take Ser Duncan's side, and then everyone goes, and then turns and looks, and he rides up out of the mist, is how they say it, and then you see him in the dragon armor. As opposed to what they did, which is the gates open first. You can tell someone is coming, and then he says, I will take Ser Duncan's side. Not a fair criticism, it's just different choreography from the way it goes in the comic and in my head. Have to say that the way they put the music in, though, which music is different from text, music is part of the visual medium, putting the music in was a magical moment, blending the two themes. That it's not just, we played the Game of Thrones theme, it's the Game of Thrones theme merging with Dunk's personal theme and playing triumphantly. That was really powerful, that added to it. So, why did I include this as a point at all? I said it's just a noteworthy point. I'm trying to be self-deprecating about point 1. Or I'm going, you slightly changed some of the dialogue. Well, I'm also worried that the camera angles weren't a little different. So what does that say about me? But, okay. Point 3 of 7. The Humphreys needed a little more setup. Well, not Humphrey Hardyng. I mean, he got decent setup when his leg was broken by Aerion. He stabbed his horse. But I'm not the only one saying this, as others like Westeros.org noted. Humphrey Beesbury hasn't even had a single line of dialogue up to this point. That you do see the two of them jousting against each other last episode. That in the novella, it was this epic joust breaking 17 lances against each other. One of the greatest displays of knightly skill in years. And Beesbury is actually Hardyng's brother-in-law. It's just your brother-in-law happens to have the same name as you. We're both the Humphreys. So Humphrey Hardyng joined because Aerion dishonorably attacked him, and Humphrey Beesbury is there because he's there to support the honor of his brother-in-law. Now, I'm not asking for a subplot, or even something as long as the setup scene for Robin Riesling in episode 3. What I mean is, I think we needed all of 30 seconds for an extra line or two of dialogue in episode 3 while they're watching the tourneys. of someone saying, wow, Humphrey Beesbury and his brother-in-law Humphrey Hardyng just broke 17 lances. This is the best joust in years. Then show Hardyng winning and then Aerion challenging him. That would have really taken 30 seconds just to say, who is this guy? They never even mention him by name. And I've been wondering on this, that such little things as a few lines of dialogue here and there just to identify who someone is, those might have been filmed, but later trimmed for pacing reasons in the editing room. And pacing is a thing. That isn't, pacing. Sometimes you do need to trim things for pacing if you don't think it works, it flows right. Bit subjective, but I understand there is a reasoning behind that. I mean, it's plausible that they could have filmed these, then trimmed them for time, or even in a script edit or something without being filmed, but the issue is that minor characters live and breathe by those quick lines of exposition. If you go, oh, well, we only took 2 minutes away from a character. Well, if a character has 5 minutes total screen time and you take away 2, as a proportion, that's a big chunk of their screen time, versus someone on the scale of Jon Snow or Daemon or something. If you have 2 hours of screen time across a full season and you take out 5 minutes for the leads, it's not the same as when you take it out for even identifying relatively minor characters. And what this really comes back to is what I said last episode about they should have added a scene or two of maybe 60 seconds of Tansel talking with her family about Dunk, just to round her out, give her some more characterization. We're talking under 2 minutes of stuff for her and for the Hardyng and Beesbury there. But this is really a last episode problem, not a this episode problem. I get that. Just such little added content, under 2 minutes, would have disproportionately improved that a lot. But then we move on to point 4 out of 7, in which I'm raving about Daeron the Drunken, as played by Henry Ashton. That this was the first episode where we really got to meet Egg's eldest brother, Daeron, who we did see very briefly in the beginning of the first episode, when he was drunk at the inn, woke up, threatened Dunk, and left. We knew that isn't really getting a feel for the character yet. Here, all of his dialogue is taken verbatim from the text, but what really impressed me was the performance of the actor, Ashton. He totally nailed it. That, again, it's like when we're watching Dunk and Egg, and we know that in episode 1, Dunk was saying dialogue straight from the book. It wasn't about the dialogue. It was about, in his performance, his choice for intonations on words, his body language, this is Dunk. Same feeling of, wow, armed with the dialogue from the text, someone else might not have done as good of a job. Henry Ashton is Daeron. That this ranks beside how I praised that Dunk, Egg, Aerion, even Baelor felt like they walked out of the book, walked out of the novella. And just little choices in how self-deprecating he is. And he really sold you that this is a man who is haunted by nightmarish visions in his sleep and has developed a sense of grim gallows humor about it, mixed with genuine guilt and earnestness. That, in case you didn't pick this up, the idea is he's really a drunk because he's self-medicating with alcohol. That if he's blackout drunk, he can have a few peaceful hours of dreamless sleep that aren't filled with scary visions of the future. Thankfully, I did see a couple of live reactor channels with no knowledge of the books, like Nikki and Steven React. I saw them, that they picked up on, oh, he must be a drunk because he's trying to make the visions go away. Exactly. I'm happy people picked up on that he's trying to get blackout drunk so he can have a dreamless sleep. But just how much the actor conveys how haunted and jaded that would make someone. The gallows humor, even little things like with grim impishness, the way he tilted his head when he said certain lines and dips a bit, and he goes, my mistakes might have doomed you. If so, I'm sorry. I know I'm doomed to some kind of hell. That the phrase is melancholy resignation. That he knows it's just the gallows humor. So I wish we could have seen more of him. Thankfully, I have seen one or two other major Westeros-themed YouTube channels going, wow, was this a really good role with limited screen time. And another thing going around on social media is that Henry Ashton revealed he auditioned to play Jon Snow back like 20 years ago at this point. That isn't too surprising because it was a giant search for Jon Snow that dozens to hundreds, pretty much hundreds of British actors at least sent in audition tapes for the role. So we know a lot of people auditioned to be Jon Snow, but I have to say he's physically a lot closer to the mental image of Jon Snow that lives in my head from the official artwork, which probably isn't too accurate. They make him a little too Bishonen and sharp featured in a lot of the artwork. That it does say in the book he has classic Stark features. He has very strong, blocky, squared features. He looks like he's Ned Stark's son, even though he's really his nephew. That if he had sharp features like a Valyrian, this aquiline nose, a chin like Ewan Mitchell, people would be asking questions even if he had black hair. So I can see why, Kit does look closer to, you have to cast him to Sean Bain. I get that. And I don't even want to knock an actor for their appearance. Like I said, Baelor doesn't look like Baelor of the book, because Baelor is clean-shaven in the novella. But the actor just nailed it so much, Bertie Carvel, he's acting like him. Appearance isn't everything, but I really wonder if Ashton could have done something with... Maybe they can reuse actors in other projects. It worked out for Jefferson Hall, who was in Game of Thrones and went on to be the Lannister twins in House of the Dragon. I don't know, but even if not, I'm looking forward to him going on to bigger things. This was a really good performance. And just every line, every motion, the playful self-deprecation and the grim resignation, it was just great. So have nothing but praise for that performance. If you think all the praise in this episode is about the final scene, there was a lot even before that too. Throughout the episode, like the acting scene, just the first scene with Dunk and Dexter coming in and crying and saying, well, I just wanted to do this. That's all good. But this is tied to 0.5 out of 7, Dragon Dreams. 0.4 was Daeron's performance. This is the issue, which is straight from the book. It's straight from the book dialogue. He has Dragon Dreams. That he inherited the Targaryen bloodline's propensity for having prophetic dreams, which they call Dragon Dreams. Daenerys and Jon have Dragon Dreams in the books. They were cut from the show. Because later they said, we're actively trying to keep out as many magical elements as possible to broaden the appeal to the general audience. Crud. Well, it's interesting, though, to see. Just think about it. The Dunk and Egg stories are some of the most grounded and realistic ones set in Westeros, with hardly any magical elements or even just non-Earth elements, not modern-day things like dire wolves or mammoths or anything that isn't a one-for-one. It's just a different landscape features, but it's basically Earth, just an analog. We're slightly different things here. And I think they tried to lean into that. Like, obviously, a Targaryen conquest show couldn't do that, much less a Nymeria show. Maybe a Blackfire Rebellion show a little, but even then, like, Sheresy stars a sorceress and things. But one thing I had hoped we might see in the first season, which we're really not at this point, in the novella, Sir Arlen explains how when he was a child, he's an old man now, he's almost 60, he died, but when he was a small child, he actually saw the last dragon. That it was heavily inbred, stunted, it was like dog-sized, but it's a point that the last dragon is only just starting to fade from the living memory of very old men still remember the dragons were real and saw them with their own eyes. And when we heard, no, we're making it really realistic here, I started thinking we wouldn't see that. When the graphic novel adaptation came out, it did show this on the page as a flashback panel. And I was kind of hoping for a bit we might get that. Now I'm wondering if we're going to get that in Season 3. I really think we could. When they introduce the dragon eggs, they might shift that. It would be a good point to bring up Arlen saw the last one. These things are still in living memory. We know they were real animals just from lived experience. That in the third novella, there's another tournament, and the prize set up for the winner is a dragon egg, if only as, a collector's item. People are trying to hatch it, though, so it's everyone trying to steal the dragon egg or try to rig the fight to win and get the dragon egg. It becomes this whole intrigue plot centered around that. This is one of those things I would ask Peter Claffey in a Reddit AMA or something if I had a choice. Just, are you saving that for season 3? Because I can see that if we wanted to build up to that slowly, but think on just how much this season there was nothing even remotely magical, which is pretty much what the novella is like. Other than, by the way, I have these prophetic dreams because I'm a member of the Targaryen bloodline. This is the only magic thing. Well, one thing I guess they added was last episode, the fortune teller that they put in. We'll see where that goes in the final 2 episodes, but that was, is she a fraud? Isn't she? This is a character directly telling Dunk, I have dreams of the future and they frighten me and they always come true, but they're coached in metaphor and you lived, the dragon died. That is more impactful. At the time, Dunk didn't believe the fortune teller. He believes Daeron. 0.6 out of 7. Just a couple of notes, and I really like the work that director Sarah Adina Smith did on this. That in her use of, well, it's 2 things. Her use of creative transition cuts and match cuts between scenes. Like looking from the stars to stones, that scene where they're going into Steely Pate's cart and the creaking noise transitions into the inside of it. Once again, Game of Thrones didn't really understand cinematography and rarely used overlapping transitions like that because they distract from the faces. That inherently advanced camera work or editing means taking the focus off of the actors and mugging for the camera. Now, as with some other cinematography things, House of the Dragon did use better techniques than Game of Thrones did. And the ones in this show aren't drastically different from House of the Dragon, they're just dialed up to 11. The things House of the Dragon was doing, they're doing more intensely. That I noticed even from the first episode of House of the Dragon, they have audio transitions and match cuts a lot more because the directors are allowed to do their jobs. In this one, it's outright calling attention to itself. It's not different from House of the Dragon, it's just cranked up. I really like that they did that. And that with a smaller cast, they have more freedom to play around with the cinematography. And the other thing I like that director Smith has been doing in this is, well, from watching behind-the-scenes videos, this is actually the 2nd episode in a row where actors said, I really worked out how to get my character's motivation and how to play it by discussing this with the scene director, with Sarah Smith. Last episode, it was the Arion actor explaining, I talked with Sarah about how Arion has no empathy. So when Dunk attacks him, he is reacting with genuine confusion and bewilderment, and just flatly, not even angry, just, why would you defend this girl? Like, he really doesn't understand. That was menacing, that you realize he doesn't care. In this episode, Peter Claffey said that it's a big scene of the first scene where he meets Egg after the reveal he's really a Targaryen, how to play it. That at first he played it angry, then he played it as, well, no, I'm angry at myself, then he talked with Sarah and worked out, no, I'm really going to play it as I feel guilty that I was so naive and thick as a castle wall that I trusted some strange boy I'd never even met before. That he feels, oh, now you're here to play a prank on the Hedge Knight and everything. They're just in terms of his verbal delivery, not the dialogue itself. So, oh, look, actors actually having the freedom to decide how they're going to play certain lines and working in collaboration with the crew instead of just being ordered to do things. So I like how they did that. And 0.7 of 7. Lyonel's armor and Brienne of Tarth's armor. That I'm looking forward to. We didn't get a behind-the-scenes video for this one. They release them every 2 episodes. I'm hoping they eventually explain in the final one a bit more about the armor designs for Lyonel. They didn't in the first ones. But Lyonel Baratheon's armor looks very similar to Brienne's armor, and that should really be no accident. I'm going to make longer videos about the costumes and stuff after the season, but it's similar armor, but not exactly. Because Brienne's original armor from Game of Thrones Season 2 is supposed to be old armor. At the time, they explained the idea behind it is that it was hard for Brienne to find not only armor in her large size, there aren't that many 6-foot-tall people, but that matched her figure as a woman. And yes, even in the book, it says she doesn't have an hourglass figure, but she still has wider hips. Her shoulders are a little thinner. So her proportions are different, that we have this muscular, really tall woman. You can see where would you find armor that fits this person? So the idea behind the armor design in season 2 of Game of Thrones is she mixed and matched pieces from old armor to put together to make something that fit her better, like wider hips from one set, chest from another one. Just mix and match until she got something that was functional. But thinking on it, Tarth is in the Stormlands. House Tarth are vassals of the Baratheons. So Brienne's old armor must be in some older style from specifically the Stormlands. So yeah, when you get a prequel set 90 years earlier, that style which was old for Brienne was new at the time, would be new during the Dunk and Egg era. And when it's new top-of-the-line armor, it's not just the old stuff that someone who can't get a real one is cobbling together. When it's top-of-the-line, this is the stuff that would be worn by the regional rulers. In this case, the Baratheons. So it makes complete sense that if we do a prequel 100 years before, instead of being old armor Brienne has, this is what Lyonel Baratheon would be wearing. This is just a theory right now. I'm hoping the later behind-the-scenes videos talk about it, but consider that the same person designed Brienne's armor. Simon Brindle. It's amazing that Simon Brindle has been the armor designer on all 3 Westeros shows. For every season. He has been on every season of every show since Game of Thrones Season 1. So when they do other things like the Lannister armor in House of the Dragon looks like it could be an earlier version of Lannister armor in Game of Thrones, same designer. Or he also puts so much work into Aerion's armor design. And there's a whole other thing in that. I didn't include that in my official reviews of things, talk about that more in costuming videos, that yes, it's that level of armor detailing and design work we've come to expect from Simon Brindle. And just in terms of continuity across time periods, what a great benefit it is that we have this one designer allowed to do it in different periods. I mean, imagine Star Wars if Ralph Bakari was allowed to do things across the span of all 3 trilogies. Yeah, they were imitating him in the later, earlier ones, but if you had one guy sitting down and doing this, Star Wars might not be a good example. It was made over decades. This is just over a 15-year period, but Simon Brindle is the armor designer on this, and he made Brienne's armor. I really think it's no accident that Lyonel's armor looks like that. As for the episode overall, people are cheering that it's got a 9.7 rating in IMDb. IMDb is a joke, and it's not trustworthy anymore because you've seen this, that things get review bombed simply for having a gay character in them. Much of this from outside of the United States at this point, and not just for us, for other shows as well. And when you have review bombing like that, it makes the entire system worthless. That doesn't mean, wow, we're going to give this a 1, then everyone will believe it. Everyone can tell you're review bombing it, and there reaches a point where getting a 1 out of 10 on IMDb means nothing because it is so abused that you're not building. You need to work up to being a film critic in order for your criticisms to stick. Not look at me anonymously review bombing something. That, thinking on it, I would also give this episode a 9.7 out of 10. Which is high praise. That this is what I give Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, where I still vehemently complain about a scene or two out of a 12-hour masterpiece. That the first 2 episodes I gave 10 out of 10. I don't normally give numbers. I'm just giving you a feel for what I think about it. If I were to give the first 2 a 10 out of 10, the last one a 9.9 because they should have included another scene. They should have invented a scene giving Tansel more characterization. This one I'd give maybe a 9.7. Then again, my problems with this episode of like the Humphreys, they needed to explain who Humphrey Beesbury was in a line of dialogue. That should have happened last episode, so I shouldn't penalize this episode for that. Whatever. The difference is, I spent all that time talking through, I can see how the speech scene is a little different, because having crowds of hundreds of commoners cheering Dunk on is weird in live action, because it undercuts how alone and desperate he's supposed to be. That has a counter-argument of why did we do it the way we did it. In contrast, why didn't you make a 60-second scene of Tansel just talking with her family? There really isn't a counter-argument against that. So it's on the basis of it required very little effort, and I don't really see any argument for why not to. But officially, in terms of the show as a whole up to this point, if I was given a choice between insert a 60-second Tansel scene or change the speech scene back to being verbatim what it was in the novella, I'd actually go with the Tansel one, because I can see the arguments on changing the speech versus Tansel. Why didn't we get this? But still, when I say, it's like the show overall, I'd give it a 9.7 at this point. That's higher than Game of Thrones Season 1 for me. Or even Game of Thrones Season 3 was my favorite season. And as I said in the other video, a lot of that is like, you can't compare House of the Dragon Season 1, which we all agreed was great, to finished prose text by Martin. So of course it's going to be amazing. It's probably the best season they've ever had, minute by minute. And I'm still really enjoying it, though. So let's see what we get the next 2 episodes. I'm really looking forward to the flashbacks that we're going to be getting in episode 5 to Dunk right in the aftermath of the Blackfire Rebellion.